everybody. Welcome to Your Money Map, sponsored by the Alliance for Lifetime Income. I'm your host, Jean Chatzky. Very glad to have you with me today. As always, we hope that this can be an interactive conversation. So whether you are joining us on LinkedIn, whether you are joining us on Facebook, if you've got a question, if you've got a comment, please just type it right into the chat. I'll pick it up, I'll weave it into the conversation, and we'll all just take this conversation down the road together. And this is going to be a good one because we're talking about the non-traditional worker. So I pulled some research from the Pew Research Center. And if you were to guess what percentage of workers in this country qualify as non-traditional. Again, if you're out there and you're listening, type your answers in the chat. If you were to guess what percentage of workers qualify as non-traditional, what would you think? Would you think it's 10%? Would you think it's 20%? Actually, according to the Pew Research Center, it is 38%. 38% of workers in this country have non-traditional income. They may have a traditional job and a non-traditional job. They may have a couple of non-traditional jobs that they cobble together to create a full income stream. Their entire work life may be based on one non-traditional revenue stream. Maybe they're a musician, maybe they're some other sort of a freelancer, but they don't have an employer that provides for them the backbone of benefits, a traditional work-based retirement plan, and health benefits in many cases, which they have had to go out and access on their own. And that makes life, it just makes it more complicated. It makes financial life in particular more complicated. My guest today is Miata Edoga. Miata is CEO and founder of the financial education company Abundance Bound, where she's been doing this work for almost 2 decades. And her specialty is in helping non-traditional earners of all walks of life make it work. Freelancers, small business owners, gig economy workers, other multi-hyphenates, figure out how to pull together a financial life that will not only sustain them today, but will sustain them and their families tomorrow through retirement. Miata is coming to us from her home in Panama, and she herself is a non-traditional worker. She comes to this out of the field of acting, which she still dabbles in from time to time. Miata, welcome. And I would be remiss if I didn't also mention that you're an education fellow for the Alliance for Lifetime Income. So great to have you.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here.
Tell us a little bit about you and your story. How did you get into this specialty of helping non-traditional workers make their financial lives a success?
So it's a bit of a crazy story, Jean, because if you had asked me years ago, I was someone who was terrified of math. It was never my strong subject. And if you had said to me, one day, Miata, you will run a company that provides financial education, I would have laughed at you. But as you shared, I am also an actor. And so I went to school and I worked very hard and I trained in college and then I trained at a conservatory in London and I got really good at my craft and no one prepared me for what it would mean to be coming out and working in a field where I wasn't going to just get a paycheck every 2 weeks, to be working in a field where no matter how hard you work, that doesn't necessarily translate into financial return. And so a lot of those things that my very traditional parents had taught me just didn't apply in the world that I was now in. And so honestly, Jean, I made a mess. Like there's no other way to describe it. At my worst, I was over $80,000 in credit card debt.
Wow.
And that wasn't me splurging and going on holidays and buying shoes. That was me trying to make my life work. And so I really hit what was rock bottom for me. And there were some pretty terrible moments and a lot of fear and a lot of crying. And I realized I had to quit or I had to fix it. And that was when I honestly started finding educators like you, and I would pour through your books and your seminars, trying to make it apply to my life. And as I developed some concrete skills and I started making changes and I began to pay back that debt, I said, why didn't somebody teach me this? Would I have made mistakes? Of course, but maybe not every single mistake. And that was what a little more than 17 years ago led me to start Abundance Bound. And originally, we focused very specifically on actors, artists, and creative professionals. But as you shared at the start, what we've seen over the years is that it used to be us strange artist people who weren't earning the same way as everybody else. Now it is a significant portion of our society. The world has changed. The way that many of us are earning have changed. And I believe that the way finances need to be approached and education needs to be provided and services need to be offered for this audience as well as those who are following more of a traditional path.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and I'm sure that my books and many of the books that you read let you down because they didn't have more than a cursory explanation of how do you make things work when you're not receiving that every 2 week paycheck. I mean we talk a lot about budgeting and how budgeting is something that A is not taught, and B, even when people know how to do it, they don't do it. But the
Yeah.
fact is, having an every 2 week or twice a month paycheck schedule makes budgeting easier, significantly easier.
Yes.
And when your income isn't rolling in with that predictable cadence, it's harder. So I'd love to today, because we've never had a guest like you on the show before. I'd love to today, although you've been on the show, we haven't gotten tactical. I
Yes.
want to dig into the specifics of how do you think about income? How do you think and income smoothing, taking an unpredictable income and making sure that it actually will last you an entire year, if not longer. I want to do the same for expenses, and I want to do the same for retirement,
Yep.
so that we have some sort of a tactical roadmap to follow to help ourselves get from here to there. So
To
your
there.
choice. Where do you want to start? You want to start with the income? You want to start with the expenses?
No, we absolutely need to start with the expenses. Okay?
Why?
Because because that is the place that shuts many of us down as non-traditional earners, is that we say, Jean, I can't budget. I can't because I don't know what's coming in, right? And the thing there is that what you said is true. Budgeting has been traditionally taught from the income perspective first. So everybody says you take what you're earning, and now we have to divide up exactly how that's being spent.
Right. They say pay yourself first. That's what they
Pay
say. You
yourself
take what
first.
you're earning and you pay yourself first. But when you don't know what you're going to get paid, paying yourself first doesn't quite have the same resonance.
It doesn't have the same resonance. And so we have had a habit of shutting down. We say, I just can't do that. And that's what needs to end, as far as I'm concerned. So we can do it, but we have to start from the expenses. Okay. So even though we may not know exactly what you're earning, I want you to put that aside. I want you to put that in a little box for now And what we do know is we know how much you're spending. And I want to take a second to acknowledge here that all of these things that we're going to talk through today feel scary. There is a fear that many of us feel in the pit of our stomach when we dive into this because we're afraid that the numbers just don't work. But here's what I want to say about that. It's scary. It has been scary anyway. It's been scary. It hasn't been working, not looking at it. So if you'll travel with us, you and I, on this journey today, what we're suggesting is that when you come through the fear, you'll come out the other side with significantly more power. So I think, Jean, that we're going to be sharing on the website at the end of this. We're going to be sharing some worksheets, and one of them is a workbook that we designed that has a list of every possible expense category that we could think of. And trust me, we missed some. I'm sure of that. But what I want everybody to do is to use this list to jog your memory about the things that are going to be applicable in your own life. So people may find that our list skews towards people who are in the entertainment industry, that kind of thing. But hopefully the categories of expenses will make you think of, oh, I don't have that, but I do have this other thing. So where I want people to start is they're going to go through the list, okay? I would suggest printing it out, and you're going to go through crossing out every category that absolutely doesn't apply to you, okay? So it's the first step. It's just very simple. We're going to go through, cross out every category that you're like,
so if I don't have a pet, cross out pets.
You get to cross that out. Babysitting, if there's no yet any little ones in your house or anything like that, we cross that out, okay? So you go through and you do that. Then you have a list, what's left, of categories that apply to you, okay? So then what I would suggest is that you take it and you create your own, and you organize that list in a way that works in your brain. So for instance, we may have called a category dining out, and you may say restaurants, right? So I want you to go through and I want you to make the list and name it the things that make sense to you. Alphabetize it, organize it, however works in your brain. So now you have a master list. So now we're going to take things in 3 steps.
Okay.
The first is we're going to go through the list and we're going to put in a monthly number for every category we just know. These are the easy ones.
Is this what we spent the previous month? Is this what we want to spend every month? Are we tracking? What are we doing?
No, for this first step, all I want you to do is fill in the monthly numbers literally for the things that are set.
Okay.
What's your rent? Or what's your mortgage? You may not know by heart your car payment if you have one, but all you got to do is look that up, right? What is your cell phone bill every month? I want you to go through first step, and we're just filling in the categories that are set and the same.
Okay, so fixed expenses.
Fixed expenses, okay. So that's the first and easiest step. The second step are the categories that are time-consuming, but they're actually not hard. Now, this is what I mean. The next set of categories are the categories that, Jean, happen every single month in your life. How many times do you go to the grocery store? Every month. How many times, if you're in a place where you drive, do you have to fill your car with gas? These are the things that show up. They actually take up the bulk of our bank statements. Okay.
And now, are we guessing on those? Are we using last?
No. Here's what you're going to do. I'm going to ask you to print out 6 months of statements from every account you use to spend money. So that would be every checking account, that would be every credit card, that would be Venmo, PayPal, the Cash App, if you are using those as accounts on their own. Okay. If I use Venmo, but I have it directly linked to my bank account, well, then my bank account is going to show that. If I'm using Venmo as its own thing, then I have to print out my statements from Venmo. So you're going to have your 6 months of statements. And what you're going to do is, let's say I decide I'm going to start with groceries. Okay. I'm going to take a blank sheet of paper and I'm going to take my stack of statements and I'm going to go through my statements looking for every time I went to the grocery store, and I'm going to write down on my blank sheet of paper how much I spent at the grocery store, and then I'm going to cross it out on my statement. Okay, I'm crossing it out on my statement so then I don't have to look at it anymore. And Jean, I don't want you to be worried about, oh, but I don't know whether at the grocery store I bought face cream or dog food. It doesn't matter. If it was a grocery store, we're going to go ahead and we're going to call it groceries. Okay. And all you're going to do is you're going to go through 6 months of statements. You're going to write down every single time you got groceries what the amount was. Then you're going to add that up, total it, write the total on the blank sheet of paper. That's really important in case you missed some later. It'll be easy to just add it. Then divide that total by 6. That's the average you spent on groceries. That's what I now want you to go back to your category list and put next to the monthly amount for groceries.
Okay, so we're going through 6 months, we're averaging, and we're going to use those numbers. Because it sounds like I'm picturing some people who are listening and they're saying, "Oh, you print out 6 months." If I use an aggregator already, if I use Mint or something like that, can I just use the number that they give me and go with that?
Okay. Absolutely. So if you're already using software of some kind or an app of some kind, you may need to go in and clean up your categories a little bit. I don't want blanket things like food.
Oh, right. Okay.
That doesn't help us.
Get a little more specific than that.
We need to get a little bit more specific.
And then what's the third expense that we have to start tracking?
So now we've gone through and we filled in the things that we know. We have filled in also those categories that show up almost every month. Okay. The last set of categories are, so now, sorry, Jean, what you have is you have a list of categories and you have a number next to lots of them. So now we have to look at the things that don't have a number next to them. And this is now where your investigative hat needs to come on, okay? So car repair, let's take that as an example. Maybe in the 6 months, maybe you got an oil change and that was it. Realistically, you know that's not the accurate number for car repair, because what we're looking for is to get an average that we spend on a monthly basis.
Right.
So that is now where I'm going to have to do a little more investigation. And one of the things that I have read is that the average American spends an average of $1,800 annually repairing their car. That's $150 a month. So what I'd like for you to do is think about last year. How much money did you spend repairing your car? We can kind of assume that number is probably going to increase by a little bit because our cars are kind of on this life trajectory, right? So we're going to go ahead and guesstimate based on what we spent last year. What was that total? We divide that by 12 and we go ahead and put that in as our monthly number.
So we've got all of these numbers on our sheet, right? We add them up and we know what our average monthly expenses are, right? Maybe that translates into our annual monthly expenses. If we have 12 of them, then we can add them up and we can come to my my nut for the year is X and I need to cover it. So what do I do then?
Okay. So, one final thing that I just want to say about the expenses piece that's really important for non traditional earners is that non traditional earners tend to have non traditional expenses.
Like
And
what?
so for instance, as an actor, I have headshots, perhaps, marketing materials, websites. I might be auditioning for musicals and I have to pay an accompanist to work with me, or classes. If you're an artist, you might have specific supplies. So I just want to make sure that, again, when you get to that third set of expenses, you're really paying attention to what the ways are that you're investing in your business. Because that's the thing. Many of us as non-traditional earners, we're actually business owners and
Yeah.
we're investing in our businesses.
So
Okay.
so we're going to get uh, yeah, I think that what you're saying, and I think this is an important point, is not to get judgy with yourself, right?
Oh, yes.
Not to think this should not be an expense for me, so I'm not going to count it, but to understand this is an expense for me. It's one that I can count on having, and so I'm going to count it. I mean, for me, I learned long ago, I well, not so true anymore because I'm not in an office, but when I'm on the road and I'm giving a lot of speeches and I'm on TV, I need clothes and I'm going to spend money on those clothes. And I might as well budget for those clothes because I'm going to spend the money anyway. So acknowledge it and don't judge. We got a user from LinkedIn who says, okay, not to jump to the income side, but they would like us to jump to the income side. I would love your thoughts on how people can break out of the what is my next gig mentality. So as you turn to income, can you address that?
Yes. So the beauty about starting with the expenses is now we have clarity. Now we know what it is that you need to generate to continue to sustain your life and to continue to sustain your work, whatever it is that you're up to in the world. So that clarity is what now allows us to turn to the income side. And this is what we want to do. We want to what is generally called revenue model. Okay. So what we want to do is say, if I've discovered that I just like to use, I'm just going to use a simple number so that the math is simple. I've discovered that my monthly number is $5,000, which means my annual number after taxes is going to need to be $60,000. So now when I revenue model, I want to look at what are my streams of income? What are the ways that money comes into my life? So if you are an artist, if you're a gig worker, then what I'm going to ask you to do is to look at, have you been doing this work for the last 5 years or more? Okay. If it's less than that, then we're just going to look at what data you have. But if you've been doing this for at least 5 years, I want to ask you to, from a place of just honesty, without all the self-judgment and doubt that comes in, to simply accurately figure out, what have I earned doing what I do each year for the last 5 years? That, yes, sorry.
No, I was going to say, so there one of two answers is going to come up. Either you're over that 60,000 or you're under that 60,000. And this happens in a lot of situations. I mean, Audrey, who's a doctoral candidate, said she lost her job and now she's learning how to budget based on contracts and temporary assignments. Same exact thing, Audrey. Really, really good point. So you're over that 60 or you're under that 60. Let's talk
Right.
about what do you do in each situation.
And so when you're over that 60, we'll start there because, it's fun. But if you're over that 60, what we need to evaluate is, where is that money going? Where is it? Because if you're over that 60, then we would reasonably expect that you have a savings, that you've been investing for your future. Okay. And if that savings isn't there, then what we know is that there's some leaks. There's some areas where you're just going to have to increase your accountability around how you're spending and where your money is going. And now we start to really say, okay, this is how I'm choosing to spend, and we start to track that. But let's talk about the many of us that are going to discover that we're under. And I know that that's painful, but again, it's been painful because you've known that things aren't working. So what we get to do now is we get to be significantly more powerful about how you're earning. So what Audrey, I believe was the name of our listener, what Audrey now knows is Audrey now knows this is what my contracts need to create. So now Audrey can get very, very clear on what is her offering, what is the price point for that offering, how many of those contracts does Audrey need. And now we're not crossing our fingers and hoping and praying and wishing that, at the end of the year, it all works out and that Audrey gets enough contracts. Now, Audrey is very clear and purposeful about what Audrey needs to go out and create. So what we're now doing is, if we can't make the numbers work in our revenue model, then we know we have to adjust. Is it that I need more contracts? Is it that I need a higher price point? In which case, do I have to adjust my offering? For those of us who are artists, where we are often waiting for somebody to hire us, we're waiting for somebody to say yes, what we have to realize is that it is virtually impossible to build a sustainable financial life if your entire financial model requires somebody else to first give you the opportunity to earn. And so what we have to do, one of the things that I had to really understand is that financially powerful people have multiple streams of income. That is not just something I like to say, it is the truth. And often as artists, we have put that as, but that's not for us. I'm only an actor, I'm only a dancer, I'm only a painter. Financially powerful people have multiple streams of income. So what we will be looking at in our revenue model is, what are the ways that we can use our incredible talents and energy and gifts and ways of being in service in this world to create some additional streams of income that make us less reliant on the one thing.
And it may not be your art. It may not be, or it may not be your art specifically, the specific way you thought you would be applying your art, right? I mean, I think about my younger brother, who's a musician, who is only a full-time musician in the last, I would say, 5 years, and he's very successful, right? He tours with Nick Cave and he tours with El King. I mean, he is a professional musician who for many, many years worked at a mutual fund company because he has two kids and because he had a 401k to fund and because, he had other responsibilities that he had to meet and he had to wait, I suppose, for his musician earnings to catch up with his life expenses.
Absolutely. And this is something that we have a choice. We can shut down at this conversation and we can say, you're just asking me to quit. Or you can hear me say, absolutely not. That is the very last thing I am asking. One of the things that we have to understand is that thousands of people stop doing what they are unbelievably gifted at and talented at and should be doing in the world. They stop doing it because they are unable to financially sustain. If this is what you want to do for your life, and what we must figure out is how you do it for your life. And I believed when I started, I believed that if I worked hard, my career would go on this trajectory. I did not expect to be discovered and be instantly famous, but I thought I'll just keep chugging along. Jane, no one's career goes on this trajectory. No one's. I don't care how famous they are. It is always this trajectory when you are a non-traditional earner. And so what that means is that I must figure out how to live my life more like this through the ups and downs of the earnings. And if I want to stay in the game, then what that requires of me is to become a powerful earner.
Let's talk about the third question.
Yes.
When you're really relying on your income to cover your expenses, and if the two sides of the equation just have to level up, that'll get you through this year, but it's not going to get you through retirement. So, how does a non traditional earner, without the systemic help in place that a larger employer or even a smaller employer with benefits provides, how do they plan for a lifetime income?
Okay. So once we've done the work of really figuring out what your expenses are, not what you want them to be, not what you wish they were, what they actually are, okay, then that is what we call your forecast. And what we need to add to your forecast is we need to add planning for the future. Because this forecast is what you're basically going to be able to take as a beginning blueprint to determine this is what my life costs me now. What is my life going to cost me in 10 years, and 20 years, and 30 years, and 40 years, depending on when you are doing this, okay? So now what our job is the same way that we've just talked about revenue modeling, how you are going to create the income today that you need. We need to also look at how are you going to create that income that you need in the future. And again, we essentially need to revenue model it. So the first thing is that as non-traditional earners, we have to be willing to educate ourselves about individual retirement plans. We have to be willing to educate ourselves about SEPs, which are simplified employee pensions that we can set up as self-employed people, about solo 401ks, which might also be an option as a self-employed person. And we need to start making sure that because I don't have the job where they give me the option to check a box and have a little bit taken out of my check, I need to start depositing into these vehicles that I have to set up for myself. So we are going to, in retirement, want to have buckets. And one of those buckets is going to be ideally your retirement account, right? The retirement account that you've set up and that you've built for yourself. One bucket will be maybe Social Security. And so that is guaranteed income. That is based on how much you have put into Social Security over the years, which many of us as non-traditional earners, we may not have been putting very much into that bucket. You want to look at, do you have a bucket that comes with your career? So for instance, I'm a SAG-AFTRA member, and so I have the ability to qualify for a pension. My husband is a DGA member, a Directors Guild member. He is also earning towards his pension. That's another form of guaranteed income. And of course, you and I are both fellows for the Alliance for Lifetime Income, which teaches us and has resources to teach us about annuities, which are another form of guaranteed income that it's important for us to educate ourselves around so we can start to put the pieces in place that are going to cover our number, whatever that number is.
Do you find that with the non-traditional workers that you work with, do you find that there is a greater need for protected income in retirement um, uh, rather than money in a 401k or another retirement account? I'm just sort of wondering about the stress level, right? And is it so much more stressful being a non-traditional worker that you have to think differently about, maybe it's your savings trajectory, or this curve that you talked about really argues for, during those up times, stashing that money into the SEP IRA, or the traditional IRA, or the solo 401k, or whatever sort of a plan you decide that you're going to use.
Yes. So, I love this question. And there's so many pieces here. Okay. So the first thing is that all of what we've talked about figuring out how we're spending, allows us, we really, as non-traditional earners, we need to try to lock that in as much as possible. So here's the temptation. You book a big job. You sell that script. You land a huge tour, and the income takes a jump up. What we want to do is continue living here, even when we're earning here, as much as is possible. Because again, that's what supports this lifetime choice. And it is an opportunity to put away the money that starts to reduce the stress and anxiety in between the gigs, that allows us to stay focused on what's next and allows us to feel more confident about our future. Are we doing this because we love the work, or are we doing it for all the trappings and all the stuff, right? Because if we love the work, then we get to focus on building sustainable lives. Now, when you say, is it more important for the non-traditional earner to create guaranteed income? I would say yes and no. And the reason I would say no first is because many non-traditional earners, we don't want to retire. We hope to keep, Jean, I hope that someone comes out on stage and says to you in the audience, Miata unfortunately passed away and won't be doing the show. Like, I literally hope that I do this until the day that I leave this earth. So we're not looking to stop doing it. Okay, so that is different in
Mhm.
that your intention is to keep bringing in income. However, what we do want to do is we want to increase our ability to do it because we can and because we love to, not because we have to. And the more that we're willing to, during the up periods, really sock away into these places that can give us some certainty of the guaranteed income, the more we know, I know that I will have X number of dollars on a monthly basis because of what I've put in place. So then everything on top of that is gravy.
I want to actually, on that point, just ask you specifically about Social Security. I mean, you mentioned that non-traditional workers sometimes don't pay in as much as other workers, and I, would imagine that's because of either lack of earnings or because the money just doesn't come. Social Security is based on your highest 35 earning years, and if your
Right.
years go like this and you're in the workforce for 50, well, you're short some years. um, is there anything that a non-traditional worker can do to actively boost their eventual Social Security check?
I think that that is, it's a question that's sort of inextricably linked to, we do that by focusing on becoming more powerful earners. And so the two, we can't sort of magically separate them. The way that we contribute more is by deciding we are going to become people who are generating money in this variety of ways, as opposed to I'm just waiting for that next
Yeah.
gig. As we increase our power as earners, we will be increasing our contributions and our ability to contribute in all of these areas. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And this whole conversation has made a lot of sense. I've been a traditional earner for most of my career, but I've been an entrepreneur for the last 10 years. And that feels kind of non-traditional in that sort of way. So
Yeah.
I get it. I think a lot of people get it. And Ruthie said, non-traditional earners don't want to retire. We want to do what we love until we die. Well said. Um,
Yeah,
so
well
so
said.
so we will leave it there. I know that on the Alliance for Lifetime Income website, which you'll find at protectedincome.org/Edoga, there are some resources. There's a budget resource and some other
Mhm.
worksheets. Is that thank you for those. What will people find when they go there?
Yes, so the workbook is really designed to walk you through the steps that you and I really started as we're trying to get very, very tactical. And what I'm asking people is to, as non traditional earners, we have to decide that we're tired of feeling fearful and we're tired of feeling insecure and unstable all the time. I promise, Jean, again, everyone, 80 plus $1,000 in credit card debt. This is not me sitting from my place of, oh, I've always earned a lot of money and I want to tell you what to do. I promise you, this is doable if you're willing to do it, and we will help you as much as possible. So the workbook is going to take you through these steps that we outlined, and it is the most important work you can do. If I could, Jean, this is what I would do. I would have you take my 6 months of statements and I would have you give me your 6 months of statements. Do you know why? Because I don't feel even a tiny bit scared about how you're spending. And in fact, I'm a little curious, right? And you're not scared about how Miata's spending. And in fact, it might be interesting to find out. So the reason why I say this is I'm asking everyone to put on your detective hat and take off the judge. The judge does not get to be in the arena. We're just taking a look at what has been so, because from there we can chart a path forward. So pretend it's you're looking at someone else's numbers, and let's get really interested in what's been happening for that person. Because again, from there, we can find point B and we can chart your course to get you there.
Amazing. And for anybody who's looking for it, the workbook is a link in the second bullet point, budget, at protectedincome.org/Edoga. Miata, thank you so much for doing this. Thanks for a really eye-opening conversation. We so appreciate you being here.
Oh gosh, thank you for having me. I love having these conversations. We are so passionate about this audience, and I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to talk about it.
100%. Thank you for watching, everybody. We'll be back with you in a couple of weeks. Again, this is your Money Map sponsored by the Alliance for Lifetime Income, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.